Welcome to today's session, which is data-driven framework for guaranteed AI return on investment. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Mark Lawton and I'm Head of Business Development here at 848 Group. So I'll be your host for today's session and we'll be joined by our partner, Prescient Labs. This is the latest in a series of webinars that we're running, which look at some of the key technology areas that are important to both business and IT decision makers across our customer base. So just before we get started proper, and I know there's a few more people pinging in from the lobby, so I'll just go through some of the housekeeping. If you wouldn't mind just keeping yourselves on mute through the session to avoid any background noise, but by all means, please ask questions as we go through. There's both the chat window and then there's also the Q&A box, whichever one you prefer. If you pop those questions in there, we'll deal with them at the end of the session. Just to let you know, this session is being recorded, so you'll get a copy afterwards. Hopefully you can share it with the colleagues if you find it useful. And also our client growth team are available after the session if you'd like any follow-up support or have any additional questions. And finally, please follow both 848 and Prescient Labs on social media so you can stay up to date with future webinars and insights. So for those of you that have not come across 848 before, I know we've got a mix of existing customers and new customers today. So just a little bit about us first. We're an IT transformation partner working with organisations to modernise how they operate through data, AI and cloud, and that's across Microsoft, Google and Apple technologies primarily. But we work across a full life cycle of change from strategy and architecture through to delivery and managed services, but always with a focus on the outcomes that IT can deliver. We're pleased to partner with Prescient Labs. They complement 848's approach really well, and combining their AI and process intelligence capability with our experience in delivering real world transformation. And we've been working alongside them in a number of our customers to identify how we can unlock measurable value across the whole business. So on today's session, I'm pleased to be joined by Andreas and Sarah from Prescient Labs. But first, I'm going to hand over to Amir, who's 848's lead consultant on business applications. And together, they'll take you through the content and a live walkthrough. So with that, I'll hand over to Amir. Amir?
Hi, everyone. My name is Amir Bakht. I am the business applications practice lead here at the 848 Group. I've been working in process automations, business and digital transformations for more than 2 decades now. So this is core to what we do. As we start, I'll pose a couple of questions to you. Number one, is AI magic? Of course not. I mean, that's the easy answer. But then why do people treat it like magic? They throw it at their processes and their business applications and they expect an outcome. And then they're surprised that they don't see that outcome. Even more, they can't calculate their ROI on their investment. So what's the issue here? The issue here is a gap in approach. And that gap in approach is the traditional approach we take to digital transformation, and it's been around for quite a while. I'll give you a couple of examples as we move forward. You need to increase productivity within your processes. What do? You roll out AI, Copilot, for example. What does that happen? Number one, it's a broad rollout. You do not have clear use cases. You miss the bottlenecks and pain points that you need to assess and fix. What does that do? It's got inconsistent adoption, and you really do not have any control over what you've rolled out. You need to do process improvement. What do? Traditional approach. You go in, you assess what's on paper, what is your business process. You identify automation opportunities, for example. You implement those automation opportunities. And then what does that happen? That basically gives you what's on paper, not what's on the ground. So you miss the operational realities. You risk adding more issues and risks within your processes. And again, your ROI is hard to evidence because what you've done is fix the problem that's on paper, not what's on the ground. So what do? You go back and you say, you know what, I'm using enterprise grade CRM and ERP solutions, right? These systems provide me with reports and dashboards. I'll use those to identify my opportunities and fix my problems. Now, yes, they do give you some insights into what you're doing, but those are very helicopter level. They tell you which processes are slow. They don't tell you why. So they are focused on the what your problem is. They don't tell you why you've got that problem, where exactly does that problem originate from, and how is that problem a challenge for you. So it hides the realities on the ground. Again, another gap. So traditionally, what we do is once these three don't work, we move on to we need to do discovery. Every digital or business transformation project starts with a huge investment in discovery to assess what you're going to deliver. Again, a good approach, but an incomplete one. It is quite heavy on your budget, on your time, and on your resources. You might be happy to invest that, but what you get is not 100% still. What you get is a biased output because depending on who shows up in your workshops, you get their views, what they're comfortable with revealing to you, that's the view you get. Senior stakeholders and on the ground people who run the operations, they have different views. They usually do not match. Now they're looking at the same problem, trying to fix the same problem, but bringing them together is another challenge. So you get a limited visibility of what you're working with. It's still better than nothing, but it's not the final product you want to get to. In all these problems, another problem that you have is even though today's systems do give you a lot of KPIs, they don't give you in-depth, detailed measures. These measures are important for you to calculate your ROI, to assess whether your investment in AI, in process automation, have been successful. Where else should you invest? All of these require another layer of information and insight into what's true on the ground. To get there, the solution that we are providing fills these gaps and a lot of other gaps I do not have on this slide. We will walk through in this webinar on what the service provides, how we leverage process mining, AI, consultancy, and ROI calculation to fill these gaps and bring an approach that basically gives you more control, highlights which areas you need to invest in, and then measures that investment for you. ROI is essential for you to know where else can you invest. As we move forward in this webinar, you will see how we will achieve this. So I'm going to hand over to Andres, who's going to explain to you what this service provides, what this solution provides, and then we will see how these gaps are filled through them. Andres.
Yeah, thank you, Amir. And the points that Amir touched on there are very much the reason why we decided to found Prescient Labs. So my name is Andreas. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Prescient Labs. And in the next 10 minutes or so, I'll just walk you through a bit more about process mining and process intelligence in general and how we believe it can help you achieve your AI goals. So I'll come back to this figure on the slide in just a second. But the first point I want to start with is typically when we engage with corporations and customers through 848, the key question that we tend to get asked is like, oh, but there's so much AI out there and our systems are a bit of a mess. We don't know exactly where to start. How do you basically uncover where to start? And the sort of rebuttal or the question that we tend to ask back is, well, do you actually understand and know how your processes work? And from a leadership perspective, there tends to be a pretty good understanding, but again, relatively surface level. So there tends to be some documentation of best practices or standards to follow that the leadership are aware of. And then there are dashboards that maybe tell whether an outcome is being hit or not, but not necessarily the path to actually get that outcome. And that's really that the problem with that is that's a pretty bad place to be starting, because if you're looking to implement AI on top of processes that you don't understand, and neither the sort of AI or the agents that are sitting on top of them, neither do they have a sort of best standard to best practice to follow, there is a high probability that you actually won't be gaining much value from it. And the last thing you want to happen is that you're implementing AI to sit on top of processes that are broken. So it's sort of helping you fail faster. And having worked now in process intelligence for a while and having really uncovered this firsthand, reading this figure, I believe it's now like 90 or 89%. This report is from last year, but it's not that surprising because companies are sort of throwing money in AI at problems they don't really understand. And that's ultimately what we aim to solve. And then just a second point, which is always a question surrounding process intelligence when it's sort of done in conjunction with AI, because AI is the thing that, and rightfully so, everyone wants to engage in because it's seen as the value driver. So why now? I mean, that very first point, the reason to engage in process intelligence is really, it's sort of the precursor to getting the full value out of AI, which I believe is probably the reason you're all on this call. Everyone is under some kind of mandate to be doing more with AI. And then secondly, margins across a lot of organizations are relatively tight. So companies can't really afford to have leaks that they are unaware of. The good news is that across your systems, whether it's ERP, CRM, accounting, etc., digital trails of timestamps are left behind that are there through process mining, can be reconstructed and used to ultimately understand where the biggest gains from implementation and usage of AI can be done. You can go to the next one. So you can think of process mining really as a bit of an MRI for your operations. So how it works is that we connect to your systems, your existing systems. So there's no need to download any new software, install any new software to your overall tech stack. We simply connect and ingest the data that already sits within your ERP systems, your CRM, your e-commerce, accounting, lead generation, etc. We then reconstruct using that data what exactly your workflows look like. There's an example of it there on the right, exactly what the workflows look like. And through that, you can then identify where the biggest bottlenecks are on average. And where these biggest bottlenecks are, the biggest delays are, that tends to be where AI, if implemented, can have the most tangible impact. And using these workflow maps and the process mining, you can then make very tangible recommendations as to how you can improve. And in conjunction with our consulting partners in 848, they can then execute on those very tangible steps that can be taken to gain value from AI. And just as an example, this is a real data set that we worked on. Procurement team wants to understand just our purchase to pay. It was taking 64 days on average That sounds like a lot, but honestly, investigating a lot of companies, that tends to be pretty standard for a lot of sort of mid-sized businesses. Now, it seemed like a lot, and rightly so it was, because there was just one step, the post-invoicing, which averaged a 22-day delay. This didn't show up in any dashboards previously, but by linking everything together and reconstructing it through a digital twin, this step was shown to add 22 days of delay on average. And here, through this diagnosis, it was then very easy to implement an agent that flagged anything that was stuck for more than 5 working days, and then identified whether the issue sat with supply side or internal PO, whether it was a receipt issue or an invoice issue that led it to simply be stuck. And this delay was then taken from a 22-day average to a 5-day average. And that's just a very simple but very tangible example of how automation can work when the diagnosis is correct. And then just another figure I just want to point you guys to is that 7.5% cases had rework or reverse steps. So that basically means that there was an error in one part of the workflow or step, which meant, had to be redone and go back. 7.5% doesn't sound like that much, but in a workflow as common as purchase to pay, 7.5%, it happens thousands of times across the organization throughout a year. It ends up becoming very, very significant. And then that was, again, something that was able to be taken action, and having the right guardrails put in motion to ensure that ultimately didn't happen. You can go to the next one. And so I'll just leave a few figures here, basically highlighting some examples of what process mining is capable of. But what I really want you to take away from what it is we're working on and the outcomes that we want for the end customers to have is really not tech outcomes. It's very tangible things that you can sort of feel on the operations on day to day. It's more satisfied customers. It's fewer delays in your supply chain. It's fewer returns. These things that really bring a tangible ROI and an increase to productivity. So I will leave that there. And then obviously the final thing that you should remember process intelligence and process mining as is that it's that base foundation that allows you to implement AI, how it was intended to drive value within organizations. But with that, I will pass on to Sarah, who can show a live demo.
Thank you very much, Andreas. So just to start that off, I'm going to start right at the beginning with just a quick overview of the data extraction, the data transformation, all of that stuff, just to kind of let you know that you are able to do it with your systems. So this is typically what we see with the data that we receive. We receive data through CSV files mainly. This can be somewhere from 1 to 5 CSV files, and these are extracted from your systems, usually straight from the user interface. So the way you would do it is you would go to the person that has the biggest admin privileges in your organization, and you ask them to simply extract the data from the front end. Otherwise, we have Prescient Labs documentation to help you do so. You have your consulting partner, 848, to help you do so. So together we can definitely extract the data that you need. I've highlighted these 3 in orange. These are the 3 crucial, most important pieces of material that we need to do process mining on. Firstly, you have a case ID. So in this procurement example that Andreas went through, that I will be showing you today, that would just mean a specific material that you needed to procure. And so that helps you track every individual case separately. In this second column, you have a name of what's taken place. So the materials were received, the invoice was created, the invoice was paid. If you had a different process, these would look very different. For example, we've worked on a lot of sort of triaging data. So if you have a company where you have applications made to you, you might have application received, triaged to the right person, then it was sent back for more information, and then it was finally submitted. So that the activities vary a lot on the process. And finally, you have the timestamp when it took place. Of course, this is really important for processes, as time delay and time saved are really important stats and KPIs that we look at. So that helps us to just sequence everything together and get those stats for you. Then I've also highlighted the team in blue. This is also a stat that we really recommend exporting to us, whether you work in a smaller team, and therefore I just mean the individual that did the step, or if you work in a bigger team and I mean the department that did the step. That being exported is really, really helpful for us. It allows us to look at things like handovers between different teams, any dependencies that can become an issue in the future, potentially how different teams are approaching the process in different ways. So that's really helpful. And then finally, you have lots of other peripheral information that are specific to the process. So in the case of procurement, that might be, can't see it at the moment, but how much the item cost. It might be whether it's like a direct debit or a non-planned purchase. It might be which supplier you went to. And of course, for different processes, that will look very different. But all of this peripheral information that you're comfortable sharing with us is really, really helpful in getting the most context possible for the process analysis so that the best recommendations can be made. So once that data is exported, I'll just show you how the platform works. So you sign in via the website. You have your own sign-in, and 848 will have their sign-in, which is very, very similar. You'll both have full transparency over the whole thing. You can see your data from both perspectives, and you can look at it independently as well as with your consultant. If we look at the procurement one, once you've uploaded your data, you give it a nice name, and you simply just add the CSVs and send it directly to us. So there's no reason to go via email or any other kind of unsecure route. It goes straight to our cloud storage. And it stays with us for a few days typically before we can do all of the process mining. We also take on all of the responsibility for the data transformation and cleaning. So if you're worried that your data isn't in a good shape when you pass it over to us, that's okay. We'll work with it. We can remove any of those data gaps that you had, and also let you know all of the data issues that you had when you sent it to us, so you can look to revise those for the future. But we can work with data in pretty much any shape or form, even if it came from, say, 2 different systems or any other issues like that. We can work with you and with 848 to discuss all of those things and ensure that we can get you value from your data. Once it's sent back to you, it looks somewhat like this. So this is a process map. It's essentially a flow chart that you would have seen many times, potentially in process documentation. And we start off with the top variant, which is essentially the way that the process occurs most of the time. And so in this procurement process, that is issuing a purchase order, submitting an invoice, receiving materials, receiving the invoice, paying it. So great. That's the most common variant. And if you were to sit down and do a workshop discussing your processes, this is probably what you already know. So that's great. Apart from the fact that in those anecdotal workshops, you will have only come up with this one. Whereas for this real data set, there are actually 759 different variants of this process in just 12,000 records. So there are hundreds and hundreds of ways that this process is actually done day to day. It's not necessarily the way that you would believe. I know it's quite a shockingly high number, but that's actually very, very common. We have here that 80% of the different cases were completed in 25 different ways. So it's a lot less, but still far more than you would have ever got from just sitting down for a workshop. This is the most common one. If you want to see more, you increase the number of variants and you start to see all of these loops appear where there are things that aren't quite going to plan. So you have payment holds appearing over here. You have sometimes the supplier confirms the order, other times they don't. All of these things that need to be investigated, and you can keep going and it gets much, much bigger. If you wanted to isolate a specific variant, you can also do that so that it doesn't become this spaghetti diagram to look at, and you can see what happens in variant number 5, for example. Now, when you're looking at this, of course, if you go too high, it becomes hard to make sense of and to get any value from. So there are a few ways that you can continue to get value from this, one of which is this AI chatbot. So before I show this, just so we understand what is on the back end of this chatbot, it is all of your process data. So all of these lines, all of these arcs, all of these numbers is understood fully by the chatbot, and they're fully aware of everything that we have around your process, your process and your data, apart from your raw data. So it has full process metadata transparency, and it can help you in all of those different ways, still without accessing all of the raw data that you have on the back end, which is why a tool like this is so much more useful than, say, a chatbot, because I'm sure your manager doesn't want you to export this data and put it into ChatGPT, whereas here you get the same amount of value or more without having to do that. So you can ask it questions if you're becoming unsure, along with asking your consultant questions, of course. I'll just write it again. Which step is slowest? And you can keep going back and forth to understand more about your data here. Okay. Then you have this bottleneck section. So we've ranked with a few different metrics, depending on what's important to you, the different bottlenecks involved in this process. And that's mostly based on the delay, so the time it takes to do the step, and also the volume of cases going through that step. If it's something that doesn't happen a lot, potentially it's not as much of a priority. So we're looking at volume as well. And you can then zone in and do some more in-depth research into a specific area. So say this one, invoice received to invoice paid. And you can also look at how different teams approach it, how long they take, whether there is a different system in place for different teams on the different steps. Okay, so that is the process map page. If we move over into team, if we are given team data, then we can have a more in-depth look into how the teams correspond with one another. As I said, the handovers, which activities they take part in, and make sure everything is going to plan. It's also helpful with compliance. For example, if you have a 4 eyes policy and you want different teams involved in different steps, you can see that that's taking place as well. And you can see which team members interact with which other team members, how often they do so, and keep a really good overview of the team here. And then we have this data health panel. So we consider data health in 2 different perspectives. Firstly, you have data quality, which in this data set is very, very high. This is things like gaps in the data, whether there is missing data, whether there is incorrectly entered data. And this is really important if you're in the conversation of AI and automation, because your agents are going to feed off this data that you give them. So whatever you put in is the amount of value that you will get out of building any form of agent or automation on top of your data. So this is something you will look to make as high as possible. Secondly, you have process health. And the way we do this is your consultant discusses with you what is the ideal process that you're looking to get out of this. In an ideal world, what do you want everything to look like or everything to look similar to? And we can then perform a conformance check against that process to see if what's currently happening is anywhere near this ideal state that you want to be in. And so we can make recommendations around getting towards that ideal state. You can also drill down a bit further into specific cases and find out the specific cases that are causing these issues, and look at a lot of different statistics surrounding data health. So the point of all this together is, of course, that actionable end result, which is, for us, 848 delivering you a roadmap, a plan, a data-backed understanding of your processes, and a data-backed understanding of how you can get to the places you want to be in terms of AI and automation. From there, it's 848's prerogative to help you even further along that journey to implement those things, to get everything in place so that you can get to those points. And so the reason that we assist in this is to get those baseline ROI figures for you. You can see where you've started, which means you can see where you've ended up. I think if you are answering to someone higher up, say a board, even if you have implemented incredible AI and it's gone really well for you and you're in that 5% that Andreas was talking about, if you can't prove it, then you don't really get the credit anyway. So what's the point? So once you have these initial statistics that you can compare against, you can come back, do this process again and see the difference, then you can really say that you've got a successful automation initiative going. And so all of this comes together for 848 to help do those recommendations. I know Amir mentioned all of the difficulties that he's faced when trying to do digital transformation projects, in that people don't understand their processes, so he can't get a good understanding, and it disrupts the recommendations he can make. Through this, 848 can produce you a lovely report, knowing everything is data backed, and help you to achieve those goals. One thing I forgot to mention is we also have places for business context to be added in. This is really important as well, particularly if you have a system that doesn't have a lot of touch points with your ERP. It's important to get that additional context into our system. So we have PDF uploads as well, where you can upload any process documentation that you've had in the past. You can upload, just even in note form, any information about your KPIs, what you're looking to achieve. Potentially, you're only looking for automations that revolve around Power Automate or NA10, and you can put those preferences in the chat as well. All of that comes together to help 848 to make the best custom recommendations for you. So that is all I wanted to share. I think we have time for questions now. I haven't really been monitoring the chat, so hopefully Mark can take over.
I am. I'm back. Yes, I've been keeping an eye on it. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for that. Brilliant.
Thank you.
And also thanks, Andreas and Amir. Really useful insights. As I mentioned in the intro, we've been working alongside Prescient with a number of our own customers, but we've also been leveraging the tool ourselves internally with our own CRM, which, to be frank, has been eye-opening. So really useful. And I think the just going back to Prescient's tagline, if you look at their website, is stop guessing and start knowing, which I think kind of encapsulates what it's all about. We have got some questions in the Q&A, if that's all right, guys, if I can fire those over to you. Just give me a second, I'll pull this up. So this one's probably for you, Andreas. I'm going to pick on you first. As a non-technical leader, how do you quantify whether an AI initiative has actually succeeded or not? You're going to take that one.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's a good question. I think a very sort of straightforward way to do it, and how I would recommend, if we look at it from a process mining perspective, is you can run, you can have a process mining run of one particular workflow pre-agent implementation. So when it's a messy workflow, and then you can run it again maybe 3 or 6 months later after the changes or the recommendations have actually been implemented, and then you should see a very tangible, dramatic decrease in time for how long a particular workflow takes to complete on average across the organization. I would say beyond any agentic talk or very technical vernacular, if I were a CFO or something like that, those are probably the measures that I would care most about.
Okay. And it goes without saying that Prescient's tool will help them to do that. So there you go.
Convenient.
Another question. I'm going to pick on you this time, Amir, if that's okay. With so much to choose from, how do you prioritize which AI initiatives should be tackled first? You okay with that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, prioritization is one of the main activities you need to do. Again, going back to my gaps, the problem with the gaps that we saw was traditional approaches just give you a high-end estimation of these are processes that are suffering. By running this tool on your data, what you do is you identify which your biggest bottlenecks are. So when Sarah was showing you those bottlenecks, they came quantified. Quantified means you actually know how long these took, and you assess against how long this should have taken. You assess that against the cost it's applying on your company to run these bottlenecks or loopbacks or variants. And that gives you a priority based on actual numbers. If it's costing you this much and it's going to be, the cost of fixing that problem is this much, then you can weigh against it. Previously, we used to just kind of wing it and say,
Guess.
it was all guesswork, where we would feel like automating these processes would be the best approach to get back some ROI. Now it's quantified. It's all calculations now. So using this tool, that's how you prioritize. No more guesswork. It gets you the actual values.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, makes sense. Thanks, Amir. These last two questions actually are fairly similar. I think Sarah/Andreas probably picked these up. Our data and workflows are a mess. Would you still be able to, or will you still be able to process, mine, and generate insights on this data?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. Just beforehand, I want to add to what Amir said about prioritizing automation. We provide all of the bottlenecks, but I think the way that the consultant really comes in and makes that shine is from their experience. So we're kind of in that inflection point where AI knows a lot of stuff, but so do people, and we can't forget that. So I think once those bottlenecks are prioritized, there is also an element of this is a really hard problem to solve versus this is actually an easy problem to solve. So I think even if it's bottleneck number 2, that could still be a great place to start if it's a quick fix. So you also have to weigh that up, I would say. On the question of messy data, yes, of course, we can help you with that. And because that is the foundational point of AI, that in itself is going to be your problem to tackle via us. So when we ingest all of that data, there will be gaps. If your data is messy, there will be issues, there will be incorrect data entry. And through our data transformation and data cleaning process, we identify all those steps. And every time that we say fix something for you, we note it down. So we have a big, long agenda, a big, long data cleaning report at the end that says, we provided you insights, but it actually took us a lot of work because your data was messy. Here are all the points where we essentially struggled, and these are the things that you need to work on fixing. And also the data fixing and the cleaning of messy data in itself for you guys is potentially a position for automation. Potentially it means that you should be automating some of this data entry so that it's more accurate, it's entered more quickly, and you don't have salespeople that are just refusing to do it. So that in itself is your place to start for automation.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think this one's probably related. It says, which business process tools can you mine? Can you process any data, basically CRM, Dynamics, SAP, etc.? Can you effectively produce some results from any platform?
Yeah, pretty much any platform. If we go back to the screenshot that I showed, 3 things really important for us is a case ID, an activity name, and a timestamp. And in any mainstream platform that you're using, this definitely exists. You have this mostly in the form of an audit log. So for example, if it's a finance process or anything that you might need to look back on, this is all kept a record of in the back end for at least 6 months, if not many years. So you do have this data. It's just about sourcing it through the help of our documentation that we can provide you, and through the help of 848 and your own internal technical teams, who I'm sure know a lot more than you think about these things as well.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks, Sarah. I haven't got any more questions in the Q&A. Molly, is there anything else in the chat? Can't see anything at the moment.
No, that should be it. So we're good to wrap up.
Yeah, guys, if any final questions, please pop them in the Q&A or the chat window. We've got a couple of minutes just to wrap up. Yeah, just with my 848 hat on, I think the combination of the Prescient tool and our consultancy-led engagement is, what will help to deliver the right results. And I think that's an important part. I think Sarah mentioned it earlier, mentioned as well about the fact that, what 848 bring to this to the party, if that makes sense. So if there's no more questions, I think we'll wrap it up there. We're just about on time, to be honest. And thanks everyone for joining today. Really appreciate your time. As I mentioned, you'll receive a recording and of the session afterwards. If you want any further help, please drop us a note, info@848 group. If you want a tailored one-to-one demo, one-to-one session, or any other further help from us or Prescient, then just drop us an email. We'll pick it up with you. So again, thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day.